All right, well, welcome everyone to Managing Trade Contractors for High Performance Homes and Green Homes with Carl Seville from the SK Collaborative. My name is Brett Little, and I'm the Executive Director here at the Green Home Institute, and today I will be your host. The Green Home Institute is a 501c3 nonprofit that has a mission to empower people to make healthier and more sustainable choices in the renovation and construction of the places we live. This year we're excited to be celebrating our 15th anniversary. We're very thankful for the support that we get from our sponsors, including our major ones, Andersen Windows, Panasonic with the Whisper Green, and Certainteed by Saint-Gobain for their Air Renew product. We're also thankful for all of our members who support our work, help support these free education series, and take advantage of many other benefits by joining as a Green Home Institute member. Again, we are an education partner with USGBC, so this course is approved for one GBCI, one AIA, HSW, NARI, Green, AIBD, National Green Building Standard, and may also be approved for your state-based contractor or architectural license. Check with your state and we can help you get that if you need it. All right, so with that, I'm going to hand it off to Carl Seville here. Carl is a consultant, educator, speaker, and all-around curmudgeon on sustainability for the residential construction industry. His firm, SK Collaborative, consults on and provides green certification for single and multifamily buildings, LEED for homes, the National Green Building Standard, and Earthcraft. You can learn more about his work at www.skcollaborative.com. And Carl, why don't you go ahead and take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this today. This system that I'm going to talk about, it evolved out of my construction business. I was a residential contractor for about 25 years, and at one point during the course of my construction business, my partner and I decided we needed a management system to handle our subcontractors so we'd get consistent performance and be able to sort of evaluate what they did. And originally we just did it sort of as a basic management system in the company, and then I ultimately sort of transformed it into expanding to manage high-performance homes, so essentially by just putting in high-performance specifications into the checklist we created. But the real key is putting systems in, and the reason you have to put systems in your business is to make it run effectively, to sort of avoid the great oral tradition and avoid doing things over and over again. Once you put a system like this in place, or like any system you have, if it's put in right, it works, and it avoids having to redo things and having to explain things over and over again, and it gives people rules to live by. What this presentation is going to be is we're going to talk about sort of why you want to put the systems in place, how you put it into place, some steps we took in putting this particular system in place, some of the troubleshooting issues, and then share some of the successes we had when we implemented it. In terms of high-performance buildings, what I have learned, and I firmly believe, it's essentially attention to detail. It's doing things right, putting systems in place that manage it right. You can sort of choose your performance level. You know, if you're doing a LEED building, there's going to be certain performance standards you want. If you're going to do a National Green Building Standard, there's going to be other performance levels. If you do, say, a Living Building Challenge, it's even further performance levels. And you can adapt your trade contractor standards to whatever performance level you want. And you know, I feel like the getting quality construction, which is the key to a high-performance building, means you have to manage your trade contractors. So why do we want to put systems in place? In my opinion, it improves all the operations. It improves the back office operations. You find things if a trade contractor isn't well directed, and the systems aren't in place, they start complaining about why they're not getting paid for this, how come they had to redo this thing, this and that. So if you have the systems in place that explains how you want everything done and explains how all the steps go through the process from the initial contract with the trade contractor through the payment steps, then it improves operations. The people in the office, the people in the field, they know what to do. As I said before, it eliminates the great oral tradition. One of the things I like about having systems, I want them short and concise. We sort of had a rule to try and keep everything to a single page. You don't want endless documents that people have to read. You want it to be as self-documenting as humanly possible. If you can get everything that documents it on that single page, it makes the most sense. And then the KISS, the keep it simple, stupid theory, makes a lot of sense to me. It's just you want to keep it as straightforward and simple as possible. And when I think about management systems, one of the things that comes to mind is you think about things that do work. And while we all have our complaints with airlines, I still find it astounding that they take off and land fairly regularly, generally on time. They don't lose too many bags, and they do it safely. So they have very terrific systems in place. Restaurants, a well-managed restaurant has good systems in place. Franchise businesses, franchise businesses are all systems. That all is systems. Someone told me once that in order for a franchise to be successful, it has to be able to be taught to somebody in about 2 weeks. Things like FedEx and UPS, the fact that they can deliver things as well. Manufacturing, we produce, throughout the world, they produce phenomenal products that have very low rates of failure because of good systems. And what I feel is you want to take the good parts. You'll see things that work in different industries and just steal the stuff that works for you and implement it in your own business. So the way we broke out our trade contractor management system is these are the pieces of it. There's a general agreement, which is essentially an overriding agreement that you would sign with your trade contractor that lasts a year or 5 years or forever until you revise it. Then you have a project agreement, which would be a subcontract that refers to each specific project. You have control documents, which we'll get into in a minute. You have the project documents. And then you have your procedures, which is the business operations and the field operations. These are all pieces that you have to put together and document and have available for everybody to understand and use. Starting with the general agreement, it's going to be signed by the trade contractor. It covers all the projects. It sets all the rules for the contractor, the rules for the trade contractor, the rules for all the employees of the contractor. And the thing I like about setting these rules, it gives you a good position to work from. If you don't have all these rules in place, you can end up negotiating every single project with every single trade contractor. If you have these rules in place, they're there, you can abide by them, your employees can abide by them. You have an opportunity if the need arises to let them vary slightly on a case-by-case basis. But when you have the rules, you can stand by the rules, and everybody does better by that. Here's some of the things that we include in the general agreement, and I'll just start now by saying at the bottom I put what else. So if you have any other ideas about things you'd want to put in here, type them in the box, and we'll talk about it. One introduction, which kind of explains your company, submitting proposals, how they submit proposals, what their, what form you want proposals in, dates, things that can be included in it, plans and specifications, who's providing them, maybe if they're providing them, if you're providing, you want to identify that. Permits and inspections, who's responsible for getting the permitting and inspections for their particular trade, invoicing and payments, how do you pay, schedules or pays, things of that sort. This acceptance of substrate, which is something I thought up a while ago, and essentially just making each trade responsible for the work that comes before them and the work that comes after them, and I'll get into that in a little more detail later. Things like property damage. As a residential contractor, we're often working in people's houses, and we wanted to make sure that people were responsible with our clients' belongings. Safety issues. Safety is a big issue now. You want to make sure that everybody is abiding by all the rules that keep everybody in line with OSHA and all legal requirements, keep everybody safe on the job. Scheduling. We always found that we wanted trade contractors to commit to times and be on time, be responsible, be communicative. So you want to identify what your scheduling requirements are. I think we had a clause in our contract where if you didn't show up for 2 days, you could be fired without cause or for cause, and it would let us move on to somebody else. Insurance requirements, cleanup warranty, changes. Dealing with changes is very important. You want to make sure that they understand that they're not going to get paid for changes unless they're agreed to in advance. Communication standards. When we wrote this, actually, it was somewhat in advance of email and text messages. but you want to just list requirements of how they're to communicate with you, who they're to communicate with. In some cases, you want to make sure they don't talk to the client. They only talk to the project manager. We used to find that the communication between the wrong people is worse than no communication at all. So we want to make sure that everybody is correct. Job site rules, things like no smoking, no drugs, no alcohol, no guns, things of that sort. So this is what's in the general agreement. I just pulled out a few examples of how we did one of the things in our agreement about invoicing and payments. I just highlighted and read the big parts. We had it set up so that payment applications had to be submitted. At that time, it was by email or fax. That would probably be strictly email. They had to be delivered for work completed on Friday, received by Monday at 2 o'clock for work through the prior period, and then payments are issued on the second and fourth Friday of every month. We pick them up and we do direct transfer. This is not that you have to do this. It's just the idea that you want to define your process. When pay requests have to be sent in, and when they're paid. And this keeps you from the trades wandering in the last thing. So I need to check for the work I did yesterday. And if they've signed this agreement before you do any work with them, they have agreed to work under your terms, and it allows you to manage your cash flow, manage your timing. People don't have to jump around and do things at the last minute to satisfy one errant sub. The acceptance of substrate, which I mentioned before. I'll read this because I think it's important. It's trade contractors agree to accept the existing or a previous trade's work when starting your phase of the work. When there is any rework required due to any problems that were visible, existing conditions, the work and the costs will be your responsibility. Any required corrections that are pointed out to the project manager prior to the start of your work will be repaired before any new work begins. To explain this in a little more detail, this will hopefully keep you from, say, a tile guy coming in and tiling over a floor that was out of level and then saying, oh, the floor was out of level, of course it's no good. Or a painter coming in and painting drywall that was terribly finished and then saying, oh, of course this wouldn't have worked out. The key is we want everybody to be the adult, and we want them to take responsibility. And if the painter comes in and says, I can't paint this drywall, it's not acceptable, the finish is not going to be any good. You have two choices. You can say, go ahead and paint it, I'll accept how it comes out, and then he's absolved the responsibility. Or you can say, I will fix it, and then we can go back and paint it. Same thing with tile or any other finish or any other product on the project. If something's, the trade contractors have to take responsibility for what's before them and not blame their deficient work on what was there afterwards. Okay, so that's the general agreement. It's got a lot more clauses to it. I just pulled out a few key ones that I liked. Then the project agreement is a signed contract for each job. It references the project documents, which are typically the plans and specs. It would normally have a work schedule and a payment schedule, and then list any special requirements. And the great thing is, if your general agreement is real solid, if it has all the things you need into it, the project agreement can be really brief. It can generally be about a page because you've got all the general conditions in your general agreement. So the control documents that we use are management checklists, which we're going to get into some more detail on the management checklist later. Each management checklist has instructions, has general information, has a pre-construction stage, a completion stage, a place for retainage, and then a place for everybody to sign off to make sure the work's done properly. These checklists, we have instructions. This is going back to that trying to get on a single page. Each of these checklists is designed with a single page, and it has instructions. And just if you read the instructions here, there's a clip right out of the checklist. The trade contractor must review all sections before beginning work. At the completion of work or phase, the trade contractor must inspect each checklist item and confirm that the work is complete and correct by signing and dating the form. And then the project manager inspects it. So what we're trying to do here is establish some responsibility for the work being done. The trade contractor is responsible for signing off, and if they sign off, saying everything's done right, and then your project manager goes back through and inspects it and sees that it isn't done right, it's a good sign that they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So we're requiring people to pay attention to what they're doing and sign off on it, and there's a process to make sure they actually end up doing it right. Each section has a general information, starting out with confirm you're working from a complete set of corrected plans that are released for construction. Review the plans thoroughly, direct questions to the project manager. This is my third one. Third one's my favorite. Read any instructions before installing products and save all the instructions for the homeowner. I can't count the number of times a trade contractor has tried to install something without reading the instructions. It doesn't go in right, or they're having trouble with it, and then they complain that it's not a good product, when if you just read the instructions, it would have done fine. In our case, we asked them to not discuss any work with the homeowner, don't make any changes, inspect the existing conditions before you start. This is a sort of a recap of that acceptance of substrate. And you have my note: unless defects are pointed out prior to beginning work, you'll be responsible for the cost of any necessary rework. And then just maintain a clean and safe work area. So this is general. This is consistent with pretty much every checklist. On the pre-construction section, we have an area. In this case, I think this is the framing checklist. We have them check the foundations for square, anchor bolts placed correctly, check the material order, confirm the correct fasteners for the treated lumber, confirm the plumbing and electrical for the framing layout. I sort of hate it when a framer frames something and has all the structural members where all the plumbing has to go, so they have to come in with a chainsaw later and frame it and cut it out. If you want to identify a central cut location, review the structural drawings. And here's where some of the high performance thing comes in. The central cut location is a requirement or a point item for a lot of green building programs. And then review the structural drawings for correct header sizing. Right sizing headers is typically available for points or requirements in green building programs. So this is where you can add in a lot of the very specific requirements for high performance homes. And a lot of these things come straight out of Earthcraft or LEED checklists. And this is where these little items get popped in. And then the final completion checklist, and this is going to be framing again. You check all the room dimensions, side everything for plumb and level. I've just kind of got a list of things down here. And down about 2/3 of the way down, again, some more green building issues. All corners are 2-stud open, California corners. All T-walls with open ladder type framing. Exterior headers have foam insulation between the boards. No headers at non-structural walls. All these things that you can just put in, you can add in whatever you want to make sure that they're doing things correctly. The other piece of this is completion. So on the left side, the trade contractor would sign that they have completed all these things. And then on the right side, the project manager, the company owner, goes through and checks where it's accepted. It's either they've done it right, it's accepted, or no, it's not accepted, or in some cases it's not applicable. And the great thing here is you can do a retention. So if you see 2 or 3 things that aren't done right, you can put a dollar amount on it. Because I'm going to hold back $500 from this guy for the things that aren't done right. And you can actually list exactly what item it's for. So when the trade contractor gets this back, they know what the retention is for. The trade contractor can sign off at the bottom with the date when it's complete. The project manager signs that it's complete, or not complete, and a retention amount, adding up all the retention items he put in, or he points out that it's fully complete, signed, he can release full payment. And this goes back with the invoice to your accounting for paying it. Now, we did this when it was still pretty much we're doing everything with paper. This has not been updated to be an online document yet, but it certainly would be easy enough to do that and make this a fillable electronic form that's then transmitted electronically.
Hey, Carl,
Yeah.
real quick. There's one question, but before that I wanted to, and maybe I missed it, but I wondered on that retention piece, is that something that's being communicated before a subcontractor agrees to it, or is that something that just, they find out at the end?
What question is that, the retention?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that would be in the general agreement, and every
Okay.
trade contractor, these forms go to the trade contractor before any of the work starts.
Okay, that's the part I missed, so I'm just making sure.
To answer Michelle's question, a cut location, a lot of green building programs give you points or require you to have a central cut location, so you're doing all the framing in one place, which tends to lead people towards reusing materials as opposed to just picking up a new piece of lumber and cutting 2 feet off a 14-foot board. So it's a resource efficiency priority. Okay, so I'm kind of reiterating this. I've kind of highlighted the green specs in the framing, the 2-stud open corners, T-walls, foam headers, which I mentioned before. So this is where you get to plug in the green specs in any of these checklists you want for all your different trades. Okay, so that's the checklist. I'll get into a little more detail about how they work later. So the project documents are the plans, specifications. They're essentially things you already have. And My only position on this is make sure they're concise and complete. And I think too many people in the residential industry tend to let things sort of slide and hope they can figure it out later. But having very complete documentations and specifications and making sure that your instructions to the trade contractor are very clear is really critical to having a project work properly all the way through. So the next thing is procedures, and I've kind of broken it down to field operations and business operations. The field operations is heavily communication oriented, heavily scheduling oriented, and then we deal with performance standards, completion, which in construction is always a challenge, and then kind of troubleshooting, figure out what's happening that's not the way you want it to be. And then under business operations, there's recruiting trade contractors, especially in a market where we have now, where there's a paucity of trade contractors, and finding good ones that want to work for you can be challenging. Qualifying the trades, orienting them to your program, and then dealing with accounts payable and insurance requirements. So I want to talk a little bit how to put a system like this in place, and I'll sort of use our methods as an example. We assembled all kinds of reference materials. We used a variety of different documents to determine what we wanted our specs to be for our subcontractors. Then we created our very specific specifications. The first are the general specifications, which is that general agreement I talked about, and the second was the trade-specific specifications. We then created the control documents, were essentially those checklists. We wrote the procedures. Then the key thing is we sold it. We had to sell it to everybody in an introduction meeting, and then we checked it we evaluated it as it went through. So the reference material, I'm going to go through each of these things in detail. The reference materials, there's a lot of subcontractor management programs out there. Several HBAs produce them. I think NAHB has several of them. They're trade partnership, similar to trade partnership programs. I bought a bunch of these and reviewed some of them. EBA Builder's Guides, Path Tech Sets, Green Building Advisor, Green Building Program Guidelines. They give you part of it's the management, part of it's the technical. I love reference materials. I love digging into these things and finding good things to steal from other people's work to use for things. So you assemble all your reference materials so you understand how you want the business end of it to run and how you want the technical end of it to run. And creating the specifications, this was probably the most fun part of our process, is we basically had a series of brainstorming meetings. I assembled all the stakeholders, which was essentially our project managers, our carpenters, and then we brought in our key subcontractors. We brought in our best framing contractor, our best exterior siding contractor, or we just brought in our best HVAC contractor. We brought them in, and the guys we liked the best, we had them help write our specifications. And if anybody hasn't done a brainstorming session, this is a typical consulting process. You basically have all these people in a room. You have a flip chart, or maybe a PowerPoint presentation you can write on. You have a flip chart. You have somebody to facilitate it, somebody that's there to sort of listen to everybody. No censoring. Everybody's ideas are legitimate. Every idea gets thrown out, gets written on the board. You write down everything, and then you slowly kind of strip it down. You slowly look at it piece by piece. Figure some of them are duplicates. Some of them we ultimately determine don't apply, but we ultimately end up with a list of specifications that we want for each of our trade contractors. And we had probably 6 or 8 meetings and did a couple of different trades at each meeting, and got to the point where everybody in the company, the trades and all of our employees, agreed that these are the specifications we want. And they are general specifications. There may be certain things in a specific job that are slightly different, but they are the core of what you're going to use to ask your trades to perform. So a couple of things like what are your specifications? There's resource efficiency issues in high performance building, durability, energy efficiency, and indoor air quality. And I'm going to pull up some stuff that we put together. We created kind of a building envelope and an insulation air sealing specifications, and these came out of our meetings. So for the building envelope, we had house wrap. It's 3-inch lappet horizontal and 6-inch lappet vertical joints. Layer overall roof flashing, flash wall penetrations with flexible tape. Windows and doors installed according to manufacturer's instructions, plumb level shimmed correctly, operated smoothly, finished with flexible tape, sides lap over the sill, house wrap and tape laid over head flashing. So a lot of this is standard stuff. This is often in drawings. Generally it's in manufacturer specifications. You may have some other requirements. This was written before I started using zip sheathing, and I would probably You might make a specification that you only use zip sheathing or only use a certain brand of house wrap. You may want all your projects to have a vented rain screen. This is where you put those things in. You make those specifications very clear in both the project specifications as well as the individual management checklists. Insulation air sealing. We just had a note. We could basically meet requirements of the Energy Star thermal bypass checklist, which is now renamed thermal enclosure checklist, I believe. Require caulking at sills, rim joists, and bottom plates, low expansion foam at windows and doors, solid blocking and sealant at chases, behind fireplaces and tubs, drop soffits, below knee walls, cantilever floors, and any other requirements. These are things that you can list whatever you want. These are the kind of requirements that we would put together and put in our management checklist, so our trades knew what was expected of them. And feel free to chime in and type in any questions if you have any. I get tired of listening to my own voice sometimes. We put in specs. All insulation had to be HERS grade 1 for fiberglass. Baffles installed at roof edges, cut around boxes, wires, etc. No bats compressed. If they use craft facing, it's stapled to the face of the studs. Blown ceiling insulation to standard depth. Chases sealed before blown insulation installed. Anything that you feel is critical for your high performance buildings, you just make it part of your specs. We had spray foam. The spray foam is an interesting one because we require all cavities to be filled to specified thickness. I see a lot of spray foam contractors spraying walls very thin to avoid having to trim, which ends up being less than code and not meeting grade building requirements. And this third one I feel is kind of important: confirm the pre-treatment on the framing before the installation. And this is one of those the acceptance of substrate issues. If the trade contractors are aware that they have to be assured that the pre-treatment is done before they insulate, they're going to hopefully take some responsibility. As a contractor, you also have to take the responsibility to not ask them to come out and insulate before it's ready, but you got to double check here. What I would love, from my point of view, is if a trade contractor comes out and says, you didn't treat this framing yet with the borate. Why do you want me to insulate? And that's the kind of contractor I would pay him a trip charge for coming out and thank him very much for telling me that he was not ready to insulate, because then I don't have the problem of having to go back and redo work and cost everybody money. So those are the kinds of specs you put together. There's a lot of trades. I think we put together 26 separate checklists for different trades. I've just kind of outlined a few of the things you want to put in there, or the types of things you want to put in there. So the next step is to create the documents. You have the results of your brainstorming meeting, and you assign it to a company scribe or a consultant. And this is where it's very hard for companies to take the time to put systems like this together, because everybody's busy, especially if it works good like it is now. Nobody has time to do anything. But taking the time to put together a system like this, it may be painful to do it for the period of time it takes to do it, but it will pay back. Bonus endlessly. Once you get this in place, it will work. So whether you hire an outside consultant or furlough somebody from the company to do this, it's very worthwhile doing it. So you start putting the documents together, and then you bring the stakeholders back in and you review it. You send them around and you say, is this what you thought it was going to be? And you give them the list of all the different documents. You give them the contents of the documents, and they look through it, and you take the feedback. You maybe have another brainstorming meeting and sort of review and revise. And then you get ready to issue them. They probably take a couple of months to put all this together, but you have a system that's in place and ready to issue. Then you have to actually have the right procedures. So you kind of want to know what you want to accomplish before you put it together. How is the process going to run? Who are the people everybody has to talk to? What are the steps? What's the flow chart? Then you put together sort of step-by-step instructions. You want to review it by the users, which would be your trade contractors and all your employees. You want to do the feedback and revisions again, and then keep it simple. Keep it as simple as possible. So in terms of writing the procedures, state the goal, numbered steps to complete it, break down each one into sub-procedures, and then test it and refine it. You're going to put together procedures and say, here are the steps, and somebody's going to go halfway through it and say, this step doesn't make sense, it's sending me to the wrong place, or I literally don't understand what to do. And I've lived on both sides of this. I've put procedures together that people couldn't understand, and I try to follow procedures that other people put together and don't understand them. So this is a challenge, and it's a skill to write easy to follow procedures. So in terms of stating goals, you want to sort of define your expectations. So our thing is, by listing our general and specific guidelines, trade contractors will understand what is expected of them. It gives us guidelines to inspect work. Project managers will have a consistent method to inspect the work. And then it eliminates payment for incomplete work. The project manager will identify all incomplete work, place a value on it to retain from our payments to our trade contractors. So this was the goal. We wanted everybody to understand what they wanted. We wanted guidelines to make sure the work was done properly. And then we want to not pay for things that aren't done. That was our goal. So we then explain the procedure. Each checklist has 4 parts, so I went through earlier. It's got general information, which is general expectations for trade performance on the job site. The pre-construction checklist identifies items they have to review before they start. The rough and final completion checklist identify items they must review to confirm that they have completed their work completely. It's kind of a little redundant, completed their work properly. And then there's a place for job-specific items. You know, you have your general list of 8 or 10 or 15 requirements. There may be some very unique things to the job. And on our checklist, we had a place where you could put those in. You could write down a very job-specific item that may be unique to that job. And if you find that it comes up on several jobs, or it's something you'd want to add in later on. So then the procedure is the numbered steps. This is what we came up with. It's not necessarily what you would use, but it worked for us. At the time of the trade commitment, the project manager fills out the checklist for each trade and makes 2 copies. Again, if it's electronically, it'd be somewhat different. 1 copy goes to accounting with the subcontract, with the vendor agreement, and they hang on to that. 1 copy goes to the trade contractor with the vendor agreement, and the original stays in our job book. We used to use notebooks that the project managers held. There was basically the guide for the entire job where all the documents were. At step 2, at the completion of the work, the trade contractor inspects their work, and you tell them to do this, and you reiterate that they have to do this. They check off and initial all the complete items. They sign and date the form. They attach a copy to their final invoice, and they deliver the checklist and the invoice to the accounting department. So they would submit their checklist with their invoice to the stage. The next step we put in, again, this is what we put together. You don't necessarily need to do this, but we found this worked for us. The accounting department sends the project manager the checklist and the invoice to be approved. And this is where we had some time, I think it was due, we had Friday to Wednesday, I think, for payment. So we had a couple of days to get this stuff done. The project manager takes the job site to the checklist and inspects the work. This is continuing that phase. The project manager reviews each item on the checklist and determines if the work's complete. If it's complete, they check the yes box. If it's no, they check the no box and write an amount for retainage. Then they total up all the retainage amounts, return the checklist to the accounting, signed complete or incomplete, and any retainage totals. Then accounting has a whole separate procedure. So accounting then takes this and then issues a check for whatever amount. And the great thing about this was that if there was some retainage, say the contractor billed $5,000 and they were getting $4,000, they had a list of the $4,000 worth of retainage. They would probably had a discussion with the project manager as well, but there is documentation as to why they weren't being paid. So that's putting the forms and the process together. The next big step is introducing it. So when we put this together, we basically had 2 big meetings. We essentially told all of our trade contractors, if you want to continue working for us, you have to show up at one of these 2 meetings. So all the trades were there, all our employees were there, and all management was there. We had a fixed start date. I think we started having our meetings in November, and we put the program in place as of January 2nd. So we basically told everybody, here's the deal, play around with it for the next 2 months. As of 1st of January, this thing is going to be in place and operating. We asked for feedback. We asked our subs, trade contractors, what do you think about this? And a couple of them had good points. A couple of them had points that we listened to, but were not willing to implement. And then the last thing is you feed them. So I think we did breakfast meetings. So it's always good to do breakfast or lunch meetings. Gets people to show up and they pay attention. But in this case, we pretty much said that if you don't come, you will no longer work for us. And it worked. Everybody came. Once you get the system in place, then you have to evaluate it. There's troubleshooting. Things are not going to go as you expect them to go. You then want to fine-tune it. You have to fine-tune the documents and fine-tune the procedures. And then you sort of wonder about what can go wrong. actually, I want to jump back in. So one of the things that went wrong is we had this whole process in place where as soon as the work was claimed to be done, the project manager would fill out the form and send it in with the retainage for payment. And we found out that one of our project managers was not sending in the form until everything was done. So it could be weeks and weeks and weeks, but he was holding off until everything was done. And that basically deprived us of the opportunity to see how this particular subcontractor was working, or all his subcontractors were working. One of the great things about this is that as you start collecting documents like this and seeing what's done right and what's not done right, or what's complete or what's incomplete, you start to see patterns. And you'll find some trade contractors are very conscientious. Everything's done. There are no retainages. Everything's done on time, and they move along. You find other trade contractors where there are constantly things that aren't done properly, constant retainages, and those are the guys that are going to cost you money, cost you time, slow down the job, and make it more difficult. So in our case, having one of our project managers never turning the forms in until everything was done completely deprived us of the opportunity to know that his trade contractors were not performing well. So that was just a misunderstanding. He didn't realize that he was supposed to turn it in right away as opposed to waiting until everything was done. Other things could go wrong too. So then getting the buy-in is really important. Getting the buy-in from the trade contractors is key, and including them in the development process. As I mentioned, we brought our best trade contractors in to help us set the specs. And if you like the way somebody works, ask them to tell you what they do and include that in your specifications. The introduction meeting is very important to the buy-in. Explain to them how they'll do better. Essentially, we're giving them tools to make sure their work is done right. So when they're done, they get they have guidelines to know. They know that they go through this list and they do everything on the list and make sure it's done right. They'll get paid. The other key to it is it actually helps trade contractors manage their own employees. Because if, for example, a trade contractor has a field superintendent and he gives that field superintendent his checklist to fill out and sign off that everything's done, and that goes in for payment, and there's a bunch of retainages, they actually know that their field superintendent isn't being straight up, that they're not being honest with themselves and claiming things are done when they aren't. And the trade contractors that buy in, they will help implement the system. They will like it. And one example I had was we put this in place, and then I actually did a project on my own house, which was completely separate from my company. But I used some of the same trade contractors, and I didn't need them to, and I didn't ask them to, but every one of them sent in these checklists with their invoices to me for my own house. So they just it was a process. They got into it, they did it, and it worked fine. And then the thing is, when you present it, if you're in the remodeling business, you're in the construction business, you're used to selling. So this is a matter of just selling it. You just have to understand what the benefit is to the people you're selling it to, and it will work. So in terms of getting buy-in, the field staff is pretty important. They are the key to your success. You have to involve them in the planning process. It's not good to just dump this on them because there will be more resistance if they're involved putting it together. Include them in the introduction meeting. If you have project managers and office people that are going to be involved or are involved with your trade contractors, give them a piece of the meeting. Just plan out that maybe the executives, the owners would introduce it, and the different employees would help introduce different parts of the meeting. And then you can explain how it will help them. And in our case is making sure that work's done right, making sure that the trade contractors are learning how to inspect their work. And the great thing is that transitioning new people into using a system like that is always a challenge. But once a system like this is in place, the new employees it's just standard. It's just new. There's generally no complaints. They know it as what they do, and that's the way they work. In terms of office staff, they pay the bills. Involve them in the planning process too. You don't want to put a procedure in place that makes no sense with relationship to how your office staff manages your bills. And show them how their jobs will be easier. And to reiterate, when there's retainage that's described very specifically as what they're being held back for on a trade contractor, when the trade contractor comes in to pick up their check or a check gets sent out, and they have a specific list of what they're being held back for, then the office staff doesn't have to get into a fight and complain with them. They can say, here's what the project manager wrote down, bring it up to the project manager. It's not the office responsibility to explain why there's money being held back. There are going to be critics. People who've been working with you with one particular process, they are not going to like it. And I've always felt that as your company evolves, whether it's going to a different area of business, into green building, high performance construction, some people are just not going to get on board. Some people may need to leave. Some employees may need to leave, and some trade contractors need to leave. I think we lost one or two trade contractors who just were not interested in working with the system we put together. But the real key is don't let dissension undermine your efforts. You have to be confident that what you're doing is the right thing for your business and it was going to make your business better and make your projects better. Constructive criticism is good, but endless criticism and complaining is not. And some people may need to move on. We've always found that as our company evolved and became a better company, not everybody was able to evolve with us. So success stories, we sold the change to our staff. The implementation was fairly crisp and fairly clean, with the exception of a couple of problems we ran into. And it continued for a long time. I did leave the company a few years later, but they did continue to use it for quite a while. And other people use the system as well. People have been using my checklist for a while and seem to be enjoying them. So to wrap up, the trade contractor management, it involves the general agreement, the project contract, the control documents, and putting together procedures. You've got business operations and field operations, and making sure that everything ties together, everything works, the procedures are complete, comprehensive, but not so complicated that people lose track of them, and match all the documents. And that's where I am. I have wrapped it up a few minutes early. If you have questions, type them in. Brad, if you want to put people off mute, we can have an open conversation.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, throw them in the Q&A there. And also, if you want, I believe you can raise your hand, and I'd be more than happy to unmute someone if they just want to ask their question directly.
Anybody? Bueller?
and as we're waiting here, as people are thinking through, Carl, I've heard you talk a little bit before on some of this, and one of the items that popped up or resonated with me, and especially working in green building certification and trying to help people manage those certifications, I'm wondering what experience you've had with some of those stated goals being a particular certification or level certification, and how you could hold contractors accountable for that being achieved.
Well, I guess as an example, you could, for your HVAC vendors, you could basically tell them duct leakage requirements they want. That you can't have more than X duct leakage. You have to cover your registers and keep them covered through the course of the project. I'm trying to think whether, I mean, you can essentially take any program checklist or requirements and put them into your specifications for your vendors very easily. And I like the idea of doing it by trade, because I've seen a lot of projects where the architects will just take the earthcraft or the lead checklist and just stick it on a sheet, assuming everybody will pay attention to it. But I think things like that tend to get lost pretty easily. But if you know for a fact that you want a certain performance level for your HVAC contractor, your installation contractor, if you have somebody separately who does the air sealing, you can put performance requirements on that very easily. You could, if you're doing something, if you do an Energy Star version 3 project where you have to have measured airflows, that goes in there, and that could be something you could maybe require your HVAC contractor to do a pre-dried wall duct leakage test and have them provide you with reports showing that the duct leakage meets a certain level. Or if you're a green building verifier or Green Radar does that they just have to respond to any defects that the Green Radar brings up in the pre-drywall stage.
Great, thanks. Well, it does look like there were actually several questions. They got bundled under the Q&A here. Do you see those now? Two of them from Michelle.
Okay, I'm sorry, I missed all those. Okay. Yeah. Okay. How does the work that is incomplete get done? I'm sorry, Michelle. Well, the idea is that the trade contractor understands that the work is incomplete, so they schedule a time to come back and get it done. And the idea is you don't want incomplete work, but you want somebody double checking to make sure that the work is complete. And the trades are inevitably going to say it's all complete. And then the project manager's job is to come back in and confirm that it in fact is complete. Michelle's other question, who's responsible if that trade doesn't complete? Well, if somebody doesn't complete their work and they're not going to complete their work, then you're obviously not going to work with them much longer. You would have to hire, not for the next trade, you would have to hire somebody else or bring in your own team to do it. The theory is that if somebody wants to get paid for their work, they're going to do the work and ultimately get it complete. And as I said before, having these documents showing how much work is incomplete in different trades is going to help you evaluating trades and understand which ones are consistently not finishing their work, so you don't want to use them. William, you asked about what kind of operating system we're using. We actually use Timberline accounting and estimating at that company, but again, I'm no longer at the company, so I'm not doing it anymore personally. And then, William, for our financial incentives used for higher performance goals, you could certainly do that. You could certainly give people bonuses. I don't mind giving people bonuses or giving them some extra money if they get things done early, do a higher quality work, etc. Better HERS equals the direct bonus. That would be a little challenging because the HERS rating is involved with so many people. It'd be a tough one. Thomas, are the slides available as a handout? That is up to Brett.
Yes, we'll send these out.
Yeah, and then you actually can buy these checklists. The tab that says store, it's an Excel file that's got 26 checklists that we worked with, and you can edit them to your heart's delight if you're interested in trying it out yourself. I think I got all the questions.
So there's another one here, right under the HERS question. Do you see that?
Yeah. How is this different from the AIA CSI Green Spec? Well, I've always found that CSI and construction specifications I found they're legal documents. I don't know. I've spent a lot of time reading construction specs, and I frankly hate them. I think they don't seem to make a lot of sense in terms of action. They're not very effective tools. They're probably good for legal backup if you're having a fight with somebody, but I can't say they're a good management tool. And what I've done, and residential construction, is fairly simple compared to, like, I'd say, a big commercial building, a stadium or office building. What I aimed to do with this was to isolate out the things that are make it all manageable so that the trades understand what is required of them. We pushed it to do it on a single page. You could certainly make it more expansive if you want to. My feeling is you find the key things that give you problems that you want to address and make sure they're there. So this I would describe as maybe a very small excerpt from standard specifications. Oh, and there's more questions coming up. What do I do when the plans are complete, but the contractor, subcontractor, or even the homeowner tries to change something? Designer finds out later about the change. I'm looking at this from the point of view of a contractor. If the subcontractor changes something without telling me to cut corners, then they have not met their contract with me, and they have to correct it. As the designer, if the contractor chooses to change something, and the contract is between the owner and the client, that's that little triangle with the architect, owner, contractor, designer, owner, contractor. And what I always felt was in that triangle, whoever's strongest wins. I've been in situations where the architect was the strongest person and they won. I've been in situations where the owner was the strongest person and they won. And I've been in situations where the contractor is the strongest person and they won. If as a designer you're using these tools to manage it, then you have to get commitment from the contractor that they will meet these requirements. And Steve, this must be Stephen Christensen from Detroit. I've had folks advising us making your specs too specific where they feel it allows a subcontractor to narrow their work and get out of doing a comprehensive and quality job. Well, that's an interesting point, Steve, because these specs are not so comprehensive that they say everything, they say everything. I mean, they still have to meet code. They have to meet all this, everything that's in the plans. And a lot of this comes up, in my experience, a lot of this comes up in the budgeting stage, in the estimating stage. Because what we used to do was we would give our trade contractors plans and our outline specifications, and we didn't use CSI level specs. We sort of wrote our own plain language specs. And we also, as part of that, said is you are required to identify anything that may be a code violation that may require additional work, and provide that either included in your proposal or as a separate option. I agree that it's a challenge. You don't want to make the specs too specific, but if you make them too general, everybody will take advantage of them. Let's see. All the lists are mentioned as part of the book. I don't think I mentioned them in the book, Tom. But there is, again, the list, the checklists are available on this. If you see the tab that says Store on this presentation, those checklists are available. Thank you, Steve.
As we're waiting for some other questions to come in, and you and I were talking a little bit about this beforehand, you know, it looks like your the list you put together is really robust, and as far as other tools out there available, if someone's trying to create green building specifications, trying to figure out what they can use to start with. You know, we've got some of the green certification programs that, you know, have open source checklists that people can access, use. Sometimes you have to purchase the reference manual for all the details. Sometimes it's all there. Are there any specific tools out there that you highly recommend that people could grab, take advantage of, start to use now, whether they certify or not?
NAHB has some documents that I've cribbed from. There's some books that they sell, and I think the Atlanta Home Builders has a trade partner guide, and they're all good for reference. And I took a lot of ideas from them, but every other one I've seen is very dense. I mean, they're like 6 or 8 page documents for each trade. And what we did was we took them and distilled them down to what we felt was a more manageable system for us. So there are plenty similar systems like this out there. My feeling is you would have to adapt anything somewhat, either marginally or significantly to match your particular business. But I would look at the NAHB bookstore. Maybe your local HBA has some programs and forms available, because there's a few books out there. Just Google trade contractor management and subcontractor management. There's lots of opportunities out there.
Great. Well, we're 2 minutes to the hour here. Are there any other? Oh, here, I see a few more coming in.
Let's see. Great. Can these documents help with lead documentation? You could probably alter them to work with lead. I mean, a lead's very specific with the accountability forms and things like that. But you could probably alter them so that they could serve as some lead backup documentation. I'm not sure they would necessarily work specifically for the submittals. But I guess the in the Lead Homes 2009, there's the quality assurance program, which is an alternate to using the durability checklist. You could probably put these forms together, and they would probably likely serve as proof that you have a quality management program in place. You agree with that, Brett?
Yeah, I think really what, is just trying to see that intent is being met from a durability standpoint. So if all those items are in there, just rearranged differently and not on USGBC's form, I'd imagine your reasonable rater or provider would accept that.
I think I see some more questions. Okay. Oh, the same ones. Okay. All right. Happy to hang around and talk a little more if anybody needs it. And,
yeah,
my contact information's here if anybody wants to get in touch. Let's see. So I have a checklist for project managers to complete on the different trades. We'll just wait for them to send in the forms and evaluate yourself. The project managers use the same checklist as the trades. So the checklists we created have a different one page for each trade. I think we had like 26 different trades we put together. and everybody works off the same document. If you wanted to, you could probably create a broader document for internal use for your project. Maybe have some deeper explanations for project managers, maybe people who are in training who may not quite fully understand what your intent is, or you might expand it for the trade contractor, be more specific about what you're looking for from them. I hope that answered your question, Darren. But feel free to get in touch. Email me if you have any questions. Happy to chat with anybody further down the road.
Yeah, so as we're wrapping up here, it is 1 o'clock. When we close out of this session, a quick survey will pop up. Appreciate if you can take that. For those of you looking for continuing education, you can put your information in there for us to get you the certificate. This link here to the specific checklist that Carl has been referencing, if you want to take a look at a sample of that or pick it up, you can actually, I think you can save this link right here to your bookmarks, or you can go right to Carl's website, skcollaborative.com/store, and that'll take you directly there. And we'll be sending a follow-up with that link, some other resources for other green building programs if you want to take a look at their specifications, and then the handout for the PowerPoint and just some other information. And if you want to contact Carl with any further questions, I'm sure he'd love to help answer them. So, well, I don't see anything else here. So, Carl, I really appreciate you taking your time out of the day to walk us through this, and enjoy your weekend.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody.